I think if I had to like prioritize something like getting on stream, I would deprioritize. I would not care so much about looking smart, having all the answers, or knowing exactly what you're going to do. I would say those things, not that important. What I would say is important is having fun, like being excited and like bringing some energy. Because sometimes you'll hear people get on a stream and it's just real quiet and real slow, and like that's a real downbeat tempo, which may be fine. That's not my preference. So I want to see people being like, here's what I'm working on, this is why I think it's cool, or this is why I think it sucks, and this is why I'm frustrated, but just kind of like amping it up a little bit. And the fear, I think, for a lot of people is I'm going to get on stream and I'm going to have to know all the answers, not make any mistakes, not make any typos, and definitely not get stuck. Because if I get stuck, people are going to mock me. And that's just not been the case. Like that hasn't happened to me. I've gotten super stuck and people have given me the code to copy and paste. And so, I mean, yeah, that's what I would say is like be excited, have fun, and let everything else kind of just wash out.
So how long do you stream and how often, like per week? Or I know with
Yeah.
recently it's not quite as much, but
Yeah.
what has been your normal schedule typically?
Yeah, so these past, 10 days I've gotten totally hosed. But before that, the stream, like the schedule was Wednesdays and Fridays, for 2.5 to 3 hours is kind of where I landed. I think I set my schedule at maybe 2 hours and then I go for as long as I need to finish up. So kind of and I do it at so I'm in central time zone. I do it 3 to closing time. So 3 to 5, 3 to 6, something like that. And there's a whole like thought process around how much and how often. I've kind of, unfortunately gotten, like I said, hosed with COVID, but I think it's really important to have a regular schedule. That's what I keep hearing from all these Twitch streamers that have been so helpful to me is like set your schedule and then stick to it. That's the best way to grow.
Yep.
And so that's what I've tried to do. And I think doing it in the afternoon, central time is good enough, I think. And I don't know how optimal this is, but I think it's good enough to get a lot of the US at the end of their day when it's like, I don't want to work. I want to just watch somebody on Twitch work and I'll, do some work also. But it's also early enough to get some of the European visitors. And so I don't know if that's the most optimum, but I like doing it then because I think my natural energy starts to wane at the end of the day. But when the lights come on, literally, and the camera comes on and I'm on stream, I feel like I power through a lot more stuff in the late afternoon than I would maybe do otherwise.
Right.
Because now you got an audience.
Yeah, exactly. Now it's like showtime, crank it up, like we said.
Well,
Yeah, your decision process sounds like ours for this show. Is like, what day you want to do? I don't know. When are you free? Wednesdays? Okay, that sounds good. What time? 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it.
yeah, and
Yeah.
we kind of had the benefit that you did too, where there's not a lot of live stream podcasts, if you will, right? So
No.
Or
that
live show.
yeah, that wasn't we didn't have to battle with that. We just had to decide when are people going to be available, and maybe we picked the wrong time, but we've gotten to the point where we've stuck with it for a year, and now people are starting to make themselves available because they want to be involved in the live stuff, which is great. That's the whole reason we do this, is because we want people to be involved in this.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you said you've been doing it for a year. Now people are starting to get involved, and you just kind of blew past it. I think that's the real, like with live streaming, with podcasts, with anything that you're trying to do, that's the real trick, man. You just have to keep going. Like it, it could maybe feel discouraging to show up and have one person on the stream. That is not a failure. That is not an embarrassment. Like keep going.
Yes.
I think, whatever most podcasts flunk out after 7 episodes or something. They stop publishing. I think that's the right stat, but like 95% of podcasts end after episode like 7. I feel like that's got to be the case across all kinds of publishing, not just podcasts, like live streaming. That's got to be the case. Making YouTube videos, that's got to be the case. If you can just keep going, if you can just stay alive, you're gonna, like, at some point you're gonna outlast and you're gonna win. And I feel like that is the thing that nobody talks about, is in the beginning nobody shows up and you just gotta keep going.
Oh, dude, I can't tell you how many nights, how many weeks, 6 months into this, I was going, why the hell am I doing this?
Yeah,
this is a lot of work, and it's doing nothing. But you just push through that, and eventually you get cool people like Aaron to come on your show, and you get lots of cool things going on Twitter, and people start paying attention, and then they show up and they start talking. And that's really what I was after, is being able to talk to people live on the show. Right.
Yeah. And Brittany says, yes, keep going. Speaking of Brittany, that's the first time I saw y'all's show. Is I saw she was on it live, and she tweeted out and was like, hey, I'm on this show live. And I was like, well, that's an interesting concept. And so I was eating dinner and I pulled up it on my phone and was chatting on my phone and was like, this is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just like, man, that applies to everything. You gotta just keep going. And like knowing when to quit needs to be real. Like you need to have that decision like in your head, like when should I quit. What I think happens though is people they just fizzle out. Like, it is okay to quit something, but you should quit something on purpose, not just because it's like, oh man, I'm just like, nobody's showing up to my streams, I'm just gonna quit. Like, right. I'm not saying you got to keep with everything that you start forever and ever, but like, make it a conscious decision. Like, hey, I tried this thing, I don't think it worked, and I'm gonna try something else now. Right.
Yeah, make sure it fits with your priorities, and your priorities shift during your life. Like, you have kids. Okay, I have different priorities now, right?
Yep.
So, if you had started streaming 3 years ago and then you had kids, you might have had to say, okay, well, I just can't do this because my priorities have changed.
Yep, exactly. I'm all about keeping going. I'm also all about consciously deciding, like, this thing doesn't fit in my life anymore, so I'm done with it. And that's okay too. Yeah.
But the other the other blocker for streaming, I think, is the getting started. And we've heard some of those things kind of in chat tonight, which is, I don't think what I'm doing would be interesting, or I don't like my voice, or I don't, and I've heard other things too, like, and I'm not trying to pick on people in chat. I said all those things too before I started streaming. Totally. And I've heard other things like, I don't have the personality. I'm too nervous to be on camera. I can't, I don't know enough. I'm not smart enough. And I think the biggest thing for this, especially for live development, is I want to see people who get stuck and make me feel like, yeah, that, they're up here doing this and they get stuck sometimes too. So I'm not a horrible programmer. Let me go hang out with them and we'll learn together. Right?
Yep.
And that's all of this is about community building. And you can't do that if you don't get out there and do it. So if you have an itch to live stream, just start.
Or also, if you're a viewer and you can actually help someone who is live streaming who's stuck on something, then that makes you feel good, because like, hey, I knew something. What do you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think, man, this goes beyond live streaming to, again, all types of like publishing or putting yourself out there. There's just so much, at least for me, and I think for a lot of people, I think there's just so much fear with putting yourself out there publicly. And rightly so, in my opinion. It's scary. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you, like, you just need to quash that fear and like man up and move on. Like, no, that's not how it works. It's scary. But I think on the other side, I think on the other side of that fear, there's a lot of potential upside. Like, you know what you're getting by not streaming, or you know what you're getting by not submitting a conference talk or by not publishing a blog post. You know what you're getting. You're getting safety and not having that thing published, right? That's fine. Maybe you decide that's what you want to do. That's totally legit. You don't know what you don't know what's on the other side of publishing. And in this case, you don't know what's on the other side of streaming. I think there's potentially unbounded upside of putting yourself out there publicly, because like we talked about, most people don't. And so the moment that you do, people look at you as if you're an expert, and you're like, I'm not an expert. I just decided to hit the button that says go live.
Right.
And so it's this really weird thing. I'm sure y'all feel this with the podcast. When you have a podcast, people are like, oh, wow, you're the podcast guys. And you're like, we just talk to each other and we publish it.
Yeah.
Exactly. But there's this really weird, maybe it's not weird, maybe it makes perfect sense. There is a reality where the people who are able to either embrace the fear or overcome the fear and hit publish, they're awarded these kind of unfair accolades, oh wow, they publish these great blog posts, or they do conference talks, they're not in my league. And it's just being able to, I don't want to say get over the fear, because I don't know that I've gotten over the fear, but it's just being able to embrace that fear and kind of ride it and be like, you know what? I will want to have published blog posts. When I'm done with my career, looking back, I will have wished that I took a few risks and put myself out there and did some talks and did some live streams. And it's going to be scary, but I'm going to do it. And I think there's a real payoff. And I don't know what the final, I don't know what the ultimate upside is, but it's, I think, unknowable and unbounded. And I think for me, it's a lot of fun. The act itself is fun, not to mention what could happen when people view me as this expert, which I don't think I've earned. I'm just the most public. I'm not the best Laravel developer, but people think of me as a good Laravel developer because I'm on Twitter talking about Laravel all the time, or I'm giving conference talks talking about Laravel. There are tons of people that are way better at it than me. I'm just more public. And that can feel unfair, because people might look at you and be like, well, I know more than that guy. But it's a two-pronged thing. How much do you know, and how much are you willing to share what you know with the community? And you can know more than everyone and never share it and feel like this is not fair, this is frustrating. Or you can decide, I'm going to embrace that and just start sharing. And it's just everybody's like, oh, wow, you're so smart. You're like, I'm not.
Yeah.
I just pushed the button.
And I think it's helpful for the community too, to see people say, look, I have no idea how to do this. Maybe I can get some help here, right? Because then the people who are looking at you going, oh, maybe I can do this because I don't know everything either, but he doesn't know everything, so I could do this too. And I think that's an important part of the streamers that put themselves out there and do that, is encouraging other people. Yes, you can do this too. You don't have to be the best programmer in the world. You don't have to be the most entertaining person on the planet. You don't have to be a wizard with stream technology. Speaking of which, look, I'm going to put this offer out there now. If any of you want to get into code streaming and you don't know how to get started with the tech, PM me. I will help you. I will tell you what you need to do to get started. I will do what I can to help you stream this stuff, because I think it's important for the community, especially younger developers, to see people going through these thought processes and start understanding that and start building this community. And I can tell you the biggest benefit for me on the other side of the publishing is that there is not a single person in this chat, and we haven't had a single guest on this show that I knew before we started this show. So the fact that I get to meet all these really cool people and talk to them and start building friendships with them is amazing. And that's a huge benefit to the person who streams and to the people who are in the audience.
Yeah, like, again, back to Brittany. The only way that I knew her was like hanging out on Twitter and talking about Laravel and Rails and, you know, making jokes with people, and finally got to meet her in person. And like, none of that would have happened if I were just like hanging out privately, being bitter that I know everything and nobody recognizes me for knowing anything. Yeah. So like getting over that fear and just starting to interact with the community. And that doesn't have to be, you know, streaming or publishing blog posts. That can just be literally interacting with people. You can come to a stream and start interacting and hanging out, and you end up with friends. And like, I have never written Ruby in my entire life, and I have so many friends in the Ruby community just because like we're all online together and we're just kind of like hanging out, and it's so freaking fun. So yeah, I would absolutely, there's a huge benefit, and that's like making friends, and it's great. Right.
And I mean, just putting yourself out there enormously benefits the community. Yeah, Brittany, preach it.
I love the Ruby community too. You guys have adopted me as your own.
we are very friendly people. I have never ever met a Ruby person at any conference or anything, online or anywhere, that has been less than gracious to me. Not once.
Well, I went to a Rails conference, like I said, literally having never written a line of Ruby code. I've never run Ruby locally. I went to a Rails conference, and everybody was just so freaking nice to me, and nobody, like, they knew that I was a Laravel developer, and nobody made fun of me, or like even like in a joking way, like, what are you doing here? It was just, everybody was like, this is great. It's so nice to meet you in person. I'm so glad you're here. And yeah. So I love y'all's community. I ran a workshop. I did. I helped run a workshop at Rails, which was wild. So yeah, there's a lot of like, I think putting yourself out there bestows a lot of benefits on you. And I feel like one of the ones that people don't talk about is the friendships thing. Like, people will come to you and say like, I know who you are. And you're like, great, let's be friends then. Like, I don't have to do all that work. People are coming to me, and I'm like, thank you. Can we be friends? Because that would be amazing.
Right. And that's a big boon for us introverts, which is what, 99.9% of the development community.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, if you want to grow your friend base, stream some stuff.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Or like Brittany said, build a shed. I'm in my shed quarters, and I decided, like, I built out this little office in my backyard, and I thought, I'm just going to share the whole thing on Twitter. Like, who knows why? Because, I think it's cool. I think it'll be fun. I'm just going to share it on Twitter. And people now come to me and they're like, oh, dude, I saw your shed. And I'm like, yeah, it's cool, right?
Yeah, I spent some time rooting around in there, and it was fun. And it's not something I would ever do. But I loved, it's not something I would even ever think about. But because you shared it, I was like, oh, this is really neat. I wonder what he's doing next. Oh, what the.
Totally.
So.
Yep.
If you like this clip and want to watch another one, you can click right here. Or if you want to watch the full video, you can click here.